Hi, my name's Cheese, and welcome to another Bonesweeper progress update video. If you haven't heard of the project before, you can check out this other video for an overview, but the TLDR is, it's Minesweeper, but you're digging up fossils, and you get to build skeletons out of the stuff you find. For the past month or so, my focus has primarily been on getting full specimens up and happening. I've also done some work on museum gameplay, Peter's been working on museum music, and Jasmine has been focused on footsteps. Building on the fossil material work I mentioned in the last video, I got to work on implementing a new type of dig site aimed at presenting different risks and rewards. For now, these are called full specimen dig sites. They'll contain one and only one of each of a skeleton's chunks, and use a special material. Even though these use the same skeletons and gameplay as regular dig sites, there's a different level of tension here. Smashing a skeleton fossil feels a lot more meaningful. Under the hood of full specimens, fossils are given a name with a unique identifier to help keep them separate from fossils of other specimens of the same species, genus, family, or whatever level of granularity I arrive at when filling out the game's content. I mentioned in the last video that I like the way the assembly music gains structure as it progresses. Something Peter and I had concerns about though was that when the track loops, it loses everything that it's built up. I implemented support for an intro track to be played before the main looping part, and this lets the early part of the music only be heard at the start of the phase, which I think we're both much happier with. When building a skeleton from a full specimen dig site, fossil chunks are limited to what was found at that site. Anything connected to a chunk that gets smashed here, or was smashed during digging, is gone for good, and so its adjacent chunks are automatically unlocked, allowing everything left to be placed. As in the dig phase, there's a sense of higher stakes at work here, which allows us to get more mileage out of the same gameplay. I wrote a text entry pop-up that displays after completing a full specimen, or whatever's left of one, inviting the players to name it. Internally, the game stores an optional custom name that will override the automatically assigned names. Eventually, automatically assigned names will be generated from the museum name and the formation that the majority of the chunks were found at, but since I haven't yet allowed players to name their museum, that's just their species name for now. In the case of full specimens, the temporary unique species name is used, which doesn't look very good right now and is a little bit misleading at the moment. Since they end up being partial, I'll have to come up with another name for them that isn't full specimens. I added terminating dots to the map phase's large travel lines, which the local travel lines emerge from. The local travel lines are now nicely curved too. I need to stop them passing over water, but maybe the right call to keep things simple is to just zoom in far enough that no water is visible when the time slider is at the present day. When moving back in geologic time, it's kinda to be expected that some places are going to be underwater, and that makes me less motivated to come up with a solution that actually cares about land masses. The skull replicas that get added to the map phase background when completing a skeleton now use the fossil material from the skull of the skeleton that they're meant to be representing. Right now, full specimen ones stand out really nicely. I now show a count on the Track Skeletons button to let players know how many species are available for tracking or assembly. Full specimens aren't listed until after their dig site is completed or expires, and that's to prevent assembly when further fossils might be later excavated. Assembled full specimens can be placed in the museum now. Any missing chunks are shown with a placeholder material. The current gold finish looks very fancy, but it's temporary for now. Eventually this will be replaced with a set of more world-accurate materials reflecting exotic forms of permineralization. I suspect there haven't really been any of the kinds of specimens that Bonesweeper depicts found preserved in or as gold. The museum phase now has a work-in-progress music track that suggests something a little quieter and more reflective in tone. At the moment it's driven by a piano melody, but we've been discussing using the layered music handler to allow that to vary by what the player is looking at or near to. This is going to necessitate some changes to how the track intros implementation I mentioned earlier was done, but I think it's going to be worth exploring. I added a temporary interact menu to the museum that allows specimens to be picked up, removed from the museum, renamed, and inspected more closely. Longer term, this will probably be a radial menu, but it makes gameplay feel a lot closer to what I'm envisioning. Eventually doorways will be interacted with in the same way to move between different rooms, and lighting panels will be interacted with for some extra room customization options. Last but not least, I've also been roughing out initial functionality for a museum map screen, where players will be able to add new rooms to their museum and modify their existing room layouts. I like the idea of making this look a little like a set of blueprints when you're modifying the museum, but like a fold-out map with a little "You Are Here" symbol when you're navigating the museum. Jasmine's been working on a library of footstep sounds for different surfaces that the avatar class can use, some of which will be used in the dig phase, some in the assembly phase, and some in the museum phase. I haven't gotten around to working out how I'm going to implement these yet, but I think it makes sense to use the avatar's existing animation player in order to sync them to footfall timing, if I can come up with a way to author that from Blender when animating. A very big thank you to the supporters going by on screen at the moment. Their support has helped me eat while making this game, and I am so very appreciative. Special thanks to new supporter Luke Carter. A huge thanks also to Screen Tasmania, who supported this project with a small grant at the end of last year. Anyway, that's about it for today. If you'd like to keep track of development or try the playable prototype, there are links in the description. And if you're super keen to try out what we talked about here today, I make early test builds available to my Patreon supporters. Thanks for watching, and goodbye!